Today looks like it could be an upslope flow extravaganza in eastern Colorado, but will there be enough moisture for everything to materialize? I'm here with storm chaser extraordinaire, meteorologist, awesome guy all around, Cameron Nixon. How you doing today, man?
Hey, I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. This is, of course, the storm chasing forecast show for Monday, June 1st. We are crossing over. We've crossed the Rubicon officially into, I believe, your favorite month of storm chasing, from what I've heard.
Yes, without a doubt.
Very good to hear, sir. So let's go
Yes.
ahead and dive right into this setup. We're going to be using the WeatherFront browser app, of course, which you're going to check out all the bells and whistles and wish you had access to it right away. You're going to have to wait a couple more days, but keep your ear to the ground because that announcement is coming down the pipeline. We'll talk about it, of course, on this show when it happens as well. So, Cameron, what are you seeing for this Colorado upslope play, and is it the main play of the day?
Yeah, just like the last couple days, there are many plays up and down the plains, I personally think. We got this broad scale troughing here. This is honestly, if you could give an ideal upper air pattern for June, maybe you get rid of this massive bowling ball trough here on the east, but you have something like this, and I just think this looks pretty good. I think we're slowly transitioning into kind of a better pattern over time. And I just like this broad, moderate upper level flow. You have a main jet streak all the way up here into Wyoming into Rapid City, and then another more southerly jet streak down into eastern Colorado and into Nebraska. So I think that's going to definitely provide more shear than we've had the last couple days, which is great.
So, speaking of that moisture, let's take a look at that now because I think a lot of people, if they're used to chasing in areas where you typically would be looking for at least high 50s, low 60s, if not mid 60s dew points to really get the juices flowing and make you want to go out there and chase, they might take a look at today's setup and think to themselves, maybe I should stay home. But if you could maybe share why that's not the case and this might be enough to actually get the job done.
Yeah, I definitely don't recommend you staying home, especially if you're kind of in the western Kansas, eastern Colorado area. I think now that we finally have shear, even this amount of moisture will be a-okay. Yesterday we had a very large pool of 70s dew points around the Wichita to Emporia area. That is going to be ushered westward with the entrance of this big trough and coinciding with low pressure out in the high plains. So what this kind of looks like is this finger or this river of moisture as it gets pulled up into the high plains. And this is just classic upslope. And as we know, once you get into the higher and higher terrain, those high 50s dew points can actually go a long way because that same amount of dew point yields a higher mixing ratio, which creates more cape and in kind of a more closer to sea level place. So if I pluck a couple soundings here, you can see that our 54 dew point doesn't seem like a lot at first, but we have 1.5 to 2 kilometer LCLs here and upwards of 3,000 Millicent stable Cape just with this sounding. So pretty formidable environment, and again with that pretty strong shear, this is a great supercell environment for sure.
I think you mentioned those LCLs are pretty high out there today. Is that typical for this region of the country?
Yeah, I would say so in general, especially when you're not dealing with low 60s dew points like you can get in later June up in Colorado. This is early season still for Colorado, so we might have some early season issues, but definitely something still worthy of playing, especially for structure. Again, those high LCLs and that dry air aloft. Maybe let's pluck something more toward Colby. Kansas. And yeah, we got a little bit of saturation near that LCL, but the high bases, dry air loft, and pretty good hodograph curvature. You could get a fairly long-lived supercell or two forming in this general vicinity. And I think that could definitely be worthy of playing tomorrow.
If you are a photography junkie, this might be the setup for you. Moving on to the next
Yes,
play,
that's what I'm
Cameron,
thinking.
you said Kansas into Oklahoma is your secondary play of the day. Why is it that
Yes.
this one's caught your attention as well?
Yes, I'm kind of going to lump in. These are all kind of tied together to some extent. I think the true upslope play is going to be something in Colorado. And let me actually throw up ML Cape so you can see the general theme of where we have the most buoyancy here. And with your true upslope play, you're going to get something pretty close to the Denver metro, maybe initiating off the high terrain or initiating off some kind of the DCBZ or some boundary that sets up east of there. And with this play, you'll kind of have maybe a really high base supercell at first, slowly transitioning into those deeper dew points. That's a classic evolution in Colorado. Maybe it's base lowering over time. These are always really fun. However, down here we have this kind of really moisture-rich zone that we've had the last several days. Still here in Kansas, and I can pluck a sounding in kind of the heart of this moist zone. And you can see maybe your LCLs are even lower. You still have a formidable wind shear and really high cape. So honestly, looking at this, you could get some pretty robust supercells. Maybe more of a large hail and damaging wind threat than perhaps a tornado threat. But could still see some good structure coming out of this, especially later on in the evening. And so what we would have to look for, though, we actually have the same issue as we had Saturday, where we have this kind of diffuse dry line down south. This is literally copy paste of this. You go plucking some soundings down here, and you get that same failure mode where we have these really high LCLs, cape up here, so we can easily get convection initiation in this kind of well-mixed layer. And it's possible that this kind of messes up any chance of good storms up here. I think there's still a chance, and we'll go through cams later. A lot of them show potential supercells erupting off here. It just might be a little bit tougher to get a sustained supercell through sunset with the looming potential for upscale growth and blobbiness down here.
Now, what in particular would people want to be looking for that would give them the signal, at least around the time of initiation, that maybe heading a little bit further to the northwest is the play of the day and they don't want to stick around that Kansas-Oklahoma border?
Yeah, really good question. And maybe I can answer that with some cams. Really what you're going to be looking out for is this kind of early initiation, right? This is 20Z, 3 o'clock and hypothetical cam land that you get this early kind of popcorn initiation stuff out in the really dry, well-mixed air mass. It's going to be probably almost 100 degrees out here in the Dust Bowl area. And if you start getting storms to pop there, you might be thinking, these might just start to conglomerate and yield some downdrafts and cold pulls and whatnot. Which is why, even though we're talking about the high LCL failure mode up here, I think these storms have the best chance of remaining discrete over time. Her is not particularly enthused, and in fact, it really overdoes or it blows up this stuff in Kansas. So this might be a complicating factor even to this. I can say I'm personally optimistic, though, that someone up here could get a supercell for longer than you could in Kansas. And I think I lumped Oklahoma in here too. We're still on the fringe of that buoyancy zone right here. So it's possible you get a couple photogenic cells to pop up. Not expecting anything to the extent of the supercells up in Colorado and Kansas, though.
Now, it does look like you have one more play that you would want to talk about today. You said a Wyoming
Northern
hipster
Plains.
play / Montana hipster play, I think, for that day, for today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, as we know, there's currently no SBC risk outlined up there. So take this with a grain of salt. However, yesterday we had a pool of low 50s dews around Rapid City. As we go forth into today, you see some analyses of mid to upper 50s dew points. And if we recall at our upper level pattern, we had this very strong upper level low here, presumably a lot of cold air aloft too. And I was actually pulling some surprisingly good soundings from up here in this Wyoming to especially Montana area. So if I just pluck a random sounding here in kind of the fabled capital area, I really love this area. Where our air is not as dry, we're dealing with more mid-level moisture. But look at all this low-level cape here and shear. I think this actually looks pretty good. You see this 55-degree dew goes a long way in this kind of higher terrain and this colder air aloft. So I'm definitely thinking there's a sneaky tornado potential up here. If not this could even be one of the better tornado targets of the day tomorrow. We'll have to see. We'll obviously have to see if those dews stay up there and don't mix out. I think that's a huge potential issue. But if you look at low-level Cape here, that region definitely stands out as having some of the most. I'm not sure if you're a chaser and you're out in Kansas, if you really want a full sun it out here, but it's just something to keep on your radar, especially if you like avoiding the hordes. And I can show a few kind of cam progressions out here. You see, I lump in Wyoming, especially just this broad upslope play, but you still see some activity up here in kind of those higher low-level Cape areas. I think the RFS was particularly enthused about it. You get a supercell or two up there, and that might be all you need to get a tornado or two around the Black Hills. Of course, maybe some longer-lived supercells down south, and of course, conglomerating into some big messes out into Kansas. Nam was, I think, a little bit more enthused for kind of the Colorado upslope and even Kansas area. You see some more kind of discrete activity, but you also see this kind of junk in Kansas. Going up here, maybe a little bit less enthusiastic about the hipster play, but it still has stuff all the way up to Wyoming and Rapid City. So really tough kind of multi-target day. Just depends on where you are in the plains and what you're looking for.
What would you be looking for later in the day to kind of give you that signal that something might be popping off in that hipster target area?
Yeah, I would have my eyes on the dews. I might throw up some comparisons here between different models. Wrap, we have these mid 50s dews, about 55 in this area. NAM, a little bit lower, right? Low 50s to 52. This would not get me particularly enthused. Maybe a good metric would be the Rapid City dew point. If we're over 53, 54 or so, that might be a good evolution. I'll just throw up some other cams. A little bit less enthusiastic, the ARW. So it's not a unanimously kind of loved area. Maybe the RFS has it, but definitely the potential for stuff up there. And notice how the degree at which dews come into Wyoming too varies a lot with which cam you look at. It's always really tough to predict exactly how much moisture you're going to get up in these high terrain areas.
So it almost seems like staging somewhere maybe towards the northern side of the Nebraska Panhandle would allow you to figure out by midday if you wanted to head up that way and take the shot or stick with the safer bet in Colorado.
It's really possible, yeah. If I was just looking at this on a bird's eye view in an ideal sense, I would be setting up somewhere up here and just waiting to see how the day evolved. That said, I know most people work around Kansas today or taking a break. Maybe even those chasers in South Dakota might want to head out west. So it just depends on how easy it is to target each area. I'm just assuming that most people will want to go here. I think it's the more faithful of the targets. We know we're going to have enough dews for supercells, potentially long-lived ones. But that said, I think to your point, Gabe, if you did chase that southeast South Dakota area, I might definitely be tempted to just head straight west.
Remember to check out those links in the description below and then watch another video.